Hi, and welcome to our Waterloo Region School of Food Gardens School Garden Grant webinar. My name's Allison. I'm Program Coordinator at Waterloo Region School of Food Gardens. I'm joined here by my wonderful colleague, Raina, and we're here today to give you kind of an overview of our grant program, what it is, what we can do, and how to apply. So today we're going to take a quick look at who we are, in case you haven't encountered us as an organization yet. We're going to talk a little bit about the Garden Grant Program, and we're going to go over the Garden Grant application process. The point of this workshop is to help you put together the best application possible because we really want to give you funding. So we'll go over how to prepare an application, what makes a good application, and what happens when you get a grant. And we'll also have time for questions and answers at the end. So a little bit about us. We are Waterloo Region School of Food Gardens. We're a project of Seeds of Diversity Canada, and we're funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation through a Trillium Grow Grant. We're also supported by community donations and fundraising activities like our school food farmers market when COVID permits. So a little bit about our team. We are a really small organization. We are staffed in the winter by 3 people, all part-time. In the summer, we can have up to 4 full-time summer students. But just for context and explaining a little bit about how and why we do things the way we do, it helps to remember that there are not very many of us around, but we're doing the best we can. And we're lucky to be able to do all the things we do with the help of some pretty amazing school and community volunteers. So in general, what we do is provide funding and support for building and improving gardens in schools across Waterloo Region. We provide garden maintenance support in the summer months. We organize a youth-led farmers market using produce that's donated from both our schools and from some citizens and farms around Waterloo Region. We also provide workshops for students and staff on school food gardening. And one of our big developments that we've been working on since we've been restricted for in-person learning is we've been developing resources for garden-based learning both in class and online. But the activity that we're talking about today is our school garden grant. So once a year, we have about 15 grants we can give out to different schools across the region. So who can apply? Applications can be entered by anyone from teachers, administrators, students, parents, community volunteers, on behalf of any school in Waterloo Region. So it doesn't matter what board you're affiliated with, it doesn't matter what level, as long as you have representation from that school, you're welcome to apply. That said, the more support you have in your application from different people from your school, the more likely your application and your garden are to succeed. So sometimes we see incredible applications put forward by a single garden champion, and that can be a great start, but it's pretty hard to take this all on your own. So we really encourage people to put together teams, to put in both the application and to start the garden building plan. So as part of our review process, we do prioritize schools that don't already have an active existing food garden, but that doesn't mean we can't fund schools that already have a garden and want to do things like restart a garden that hasn't been used in a couple of years, make some repairs, upgrade or expand your garden, or build more garden plots. You're totally welcome to apply, but if it comes down to having to choose between a program that's never received funding before and doesn't have a garden, they do receive priority. So why would you want to apply to our grant program? Well, gardens are really great tools for learning. We may be kind of preaching to the converted here because you're watching a webinar about school gardening, but the reason we exist as an organization is we think gardens are really great tools for learning. Gardens can help build community in schools. They can help students develop not only in terms of their understanding of curriculum subjects like math, science, environmental studies, arts, but also develop as people, as members of society, and as leaders. Gardens on campus also support student, staff, and community well-being. So just being able to see green space around your school has a really positive effect on mental health for kind of everyone involved. And we've heard some really positive feedback from students about having a space on their school site to go to when they're stressed out and to be in nature. Something we're seeing more and more over the past year is gardens make a lot of sense because outdoor learning is safer during COVID. And it's pretty challenging to find outdoor learning space, especially in the winter. But gardens can act as an outdoor classroom with a lot of resources for learning that you can use for so many different classes. The other reason you should apply is that it's a chance for a free garden. We are giving out funding to help you make this happen, and we really want to help you grow. In case you want to learn anything more about the benefits of school gardens, we'll be dropping the link to this chat in the to this presentation in the chat box. You can have the slides and all of the information with it. And there's a link there to a report about school gardens in Waterloo Region from a couple of years ago that can give you some more background on what school gardens can do and what's been happening around them over the past few years. So what does the grant provide? Each grant is worth up to $1,500 to purchase building materials, soils, seeds, plants, watering equipment, garden tools, kind of the basic whatever you need to get your garden started. It also gives you support from Waterloo Region School Food Garden staff and some of our affiliated expert gardeners from Seeds of Diversity Canada and from our community partners to help plan and build your garden. We also offer build day coordination that includes planning out your build day, logistics of getting everyone together, getting your supplies ordered and delivered, recruiting volunteers, and support from some of our staff and our volunteers on build day. You also get connected to a network of schools with gardens and the many wonderful staff and volunteers who support them. And we've seen some really neat partnerships between some of our schools emerge over the years. So there are programs that we would love to see grow where secondary schools are helping the primary schools with some of their maintenance and learning programs. Staff who have a bit more experience building gardens can help other schools get started. And we even have some of our secondary school shop programs and green industries programs building materials for other schools. And when you win a grant, you're also winning ongoing support from our School Food Gardens team to help your garden keep healthy and engage students and community members in garden-based learning. So it's not just a one-off contact where we give you money. We're here to help you get your garden started, learn how to use it, and we're always working on building resources to help you make the best use out of it. But we do ask for a certain commitment from you if you win a grant. So if you accept a grant from us, what we're asking is that you're committing to work with our team to plan and build a garden within the allocated budget. We're asking you to build and stick to a plan for garden maintenance and use. We also ask that anybody who receives a grant completes a brief anonymous online evaluation to help improve our program at 2 points, so before and after your build. And this is a requirement of our funding from the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It's both part of the process that got us the grant in the first place and also plays a factor in us getting future funding. So this isn't mandatory. Individuals have all of the option to participate or not, but it's really helpful for us if you do. And this brief online evaluation has been approved by the ethics staff at the Waterloo Region District School Board and the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. And we'll provide everything you need to participate. And again, anyone can choose whether or not they want to participate. And this is all anonymous. If you receive a garden, we're asking that you use your garden for activities promoting sustainability, healthy eating, and food security. And again, we can help with resources to help you do that. We hope that you can commit to becoming a member of the Waterloo Region School Food Gardens community, so trying to connect with some of our other schools. And we also love it when people record success stories for us. We love to share with other schools in our region what you're doing. So we have some great examples on our website of schools that have built gardens in the past and what they're up to now. It's a really great way to celebrate the work being done at all these schools. And again, it helps people learn about what we do and helps us continue to fund this kind of programming. And we'd also love if you share any other resources that you would like with our online community. We're here to help kind of network and share resources wherever we can. So what's involved in applying for a school food garden grant? There's some things to think about before you apply. So we've extended the deadline for this year to March 19th. It's been a challenging year for a lot of people. It's pretty hard to make decisions about the future and plan for things right now. So we wanted to give everyone a little bit more time. You can check out the link to our application form, which is online, and you can just fill that out at your leisure and submit it to us via email. The instructions are all in there, and we'll be going over what's part of it. One really important thing to do when you're getting your application together, when you first start thinking about these programs, building your own garden, is to start thinking about building a garden team. Quite often it starts with one or two people who are interested. Someone coming to a webinar, someone starting to take a look at the grant program. But the more people you have involved in planning and getting these programs started, the more people you'll have to support it as it goes on. It's a lot for one person to take on. The more people involved, the more people engaged, the more people supporting this, the better chance your garden has to succeed. So once you've got a few people involved who might want to help out with the application process and with being involved in the garden in the future, you want to take a look at your grounds. And again, we'll get into the details of how you can do that. You can take a look at all of your funding options. So we offer $1,500. What a lot of our other schools have done is combined this with other funding options. So maybe they have some funds allocated from their school, maybe they have another grant they're looking to apply for. So if the garden that you're dreaming of doesn't quite fit within our budget, we can help you find ways, other things to apply for, look at what other schools have done to increase your funding and make sure you get what you need. And it's important to take all of these different options into account, because if you can dream bigger than $1,500, if you have the option to put that all together, that might change the way you want to plan your build. Based on the grounds that you have available, the funding you have available, and what your school wants to do, you can draft a plan. And we really, really encourage anybody who's interested in applying to just come talk to us. We really want to help you succeed. We really want to give you this grant and help you build a garden. So we're here to answer any questions you have and put together the best plan possible. So in the application form, this is kind of an overview. It's separated into a few different questions, but here's kind of the key components of what we're looking for in an application. We're asking for a description of why your school wants a garden. We want to know about your school garden team. We want to see some sort of physical plan or description for your garden. We want to see a build day plan, so a plan for how you're actually going to go about doing the build. A plan for how you're going to engage people in using the garden in the future. Kind of an argument or a case for what your school could do if you're given a garden grant. And a draft budget. Again, things can change. Programming can change, the cost of things can change. You're not set in stone to what you propose within that budget, as long as it stays under $1,500 and you have a realistic sense of what you want to do. If there's a little bit of change in what you spend the money on, we can work with you on that. But we'd like to see as accurate a budget as possible. So one of the first things we're looking for in getting to know about your school and your garden is why you want to build a garden. What got you started? Who's bringing this question up? Was it parents who are interested? Is it students who are interested? And who's involved in working on this application and why? These are things that are helpful to know because, again, the more people you have involved in planning who's going to build the garden and who's going to use it and how, the more likely it is that your garden's going to be used. If you want people to participate, the best thing you can do is ask them how they'd like to be involved. So the earlier you get people involved, the better. And we'd like to know kind of who's on board and what role they're playing early on. And we also want to know a bit about what you want to do with your garden and why. The next thing we want to hear about is your garden team. And that kind of builds on what we're asking about in the why. And this whole application isn't really designed as a test. There's no, yes or no, right or wrong answers. It's really designed to help you think through the different stages of planning a garden and get the best plan you can. So one of the things we ask for is a description of how staff, including administration and teachers, will be involved in the garden. And we ask you to name 3 garden champions. So those are people who are committed to taking certain roles in communicating with our team, being involved in the garden. And we'd like their names, their roles, and what they can do. And the reason we ask for this is things change over time. And when it's one person leading a garden, you can have amazing results with that kind of leadership. But that's a lot to put on one person. And if anything comes up that changes that person's ability to take on this role, anything from burnout, changing jobs, moving, graduating, there's all sorts of things that can happen that mean people aren't able to give the same sort of time and energy to a garden. And this can lead to gardens being dropped, gardens not being used as well as possible, gardens not being maintained. It's actually one of the main reasons gardens fail in the long term. So we want to cut that off right at the beginning, and we want to maximize the chances that your garden will succeed. So one of the best ways to do that is right from the get-go, having multiple people involved who can step in and take leadership roles in different ways. So that's kind of spreading out the work. And it's also making sure that someone else can step in if someone else needs to take a step back. So this can be parents, this can be principals, this can be teachers, it can be neighbors, but we're looking for people in different roles who can play an ongoing part in both this grant, in both building the garden, and also in kind of longer term, keeping it going and keeping it growing. So we want to see some sort of evidence that this garden has support and input from, more than just one teacher, more than just one administrator. The more people you have involved, the more people you have supporting it, the better. So you want to see that there's different people from your school community who are involved and who are committed to playing an ongoing role, and also some sense of who's going to be doing what in the future. And the other thing that we kind of need, and is important both logistically and in terms of planning, is support and approval from school administration. So we have to have approval from the school board to do any kind of building. We need to have approval from the principal to be able to be on site. So that kind of thing is important. You probably want to be asking them too. So the next thing that our application gets into is what we're looking for in terms of a physical description or a plan of your garden. So that's really getting down into some of the details. What do you want to build? Is it a specific type of garden bed? How many of them do you want to have? What kind of dimensions do you want it to have? So there's lots of different ways to do this. Some people like having, just a really simple 4x8 wooden frame raised bed that we can fill with dirt and plant things in. Some people have some more complicated plans in terms of building maybe, say, large raised aluminum beds or a more complex structure that's higher off the ground and more accessible. There's lots of neat things you can do. And starting your budget and plan with a sense of what exactly it is you're looking to build is really important. And on top of gardens, we can also include things. If you're including a really simple garden bed and you have some extra funding in your $1,500, we can also include features like benches, picnic tables, things that help people use the space. And part of planning all of this is figuring out where on your school property you're going to be putting this. So that's why in the beginning, when we're talking about what you do before you apply, we like people to kind of take a look around the school, see what kind of space exists, whether or not other people might have plans for it, what kind of things are around it that you might want to be thinking about. So we'd like to know kind of where in relation to the school your garden is going to be. So is it behind the school? Is it on the front lawn? And what's going on around it? Is it near a tool shed? Is it near some water access? Is there a parking lot next to it? Is there a playground next to it? Is it right outside a specific class? Just kind of some of the context factors that are important to think about when you're planning and building a garden. Another important thing to consider is how much sunlight it gets. You don't really want to build a food garden in an area that doesn't get a ton of sun. It can be challenging if your garden gets way too much sun. There's different factors and different ways to work around any kind of constraints you have, but thinking about sunlight is another really important factor. Another important thing to consider is what the land is like. So are you building in an area that's already been covered in concrete or asphalt that will need to put new soil on? Are we working with, an area of the playground that hasn't been covered and that has soil, and you want to know what kind of quality it has? Has it been covered with concrete in the past? Has there been a garden there before? Is there any chance there might have been some contamination there in the past? So whatever you can learn, and we know that not everybody has access to this information, but whatever you can learn and whatever kind of information you can provide about what's kind of gone on with that soil and what we might need to do with it is really helpful. Accessing water is another really important one. So a lot of the newer schools do have outside water mains built in that we can access, but some schools don't, or some schools have them in places that might be a little bit difficult to access from other spaces. So as part of our funding, we can do things like buy a hose, we can do things like provide buckets and watering cans, but you want to make sure that the garden that you're building is as close to a water source as possible. That's a pretty hard thing to change in terms of the infrastructure for your school, so the more you know about that and plan around it, the better. Worst case scenario, or not even worst case scenario, if you do have challenges in terms of accessing an outdoor water main, we can look into options like rain barrels and other sorts of water storage. But this is a really important thing to take into account from the start. And another thing to think about is how accessible this proposed space is for members of your community. And by accessible, we mean a lot of different things. If this is supposed to be a garden that's accessible to parents and students outside of school hours, can they get there? Is this area blocked off? Is it locked? Is there security? Both in terms of keeping people safe and also in terms of making sure people can get there if they need to. Accessible can also be a matter of whether or not it is walkable, whether or not there's enough space between garden beds for people who use mobility devices to come through, whether or not people who can't crouch down or stand up really tall for long periods of time can reach the gardens. There's lots of different things that you might want to consider depending on what the community at your school looks like and how they might want to use your garden. So what accessible looks like is going to look different for every school, but thinking about who's going to use the garden, how they're going to use it, and what we can do to make it as easy as possible for them to use it is another factor in planning. And I've included some links here to some different resources to kind of help you answer those questions. So we have a bunch of things listed on our website, links to previous garden plans, different kind of how-to guides. There's also a really neat organization called kidsgardening.org, and they have a really neat section of their website called Design a Garden with a lot of different resources, both for adults planning a garden and also for helping getting kids involved in designing a garden. And I also included a link to a bunch of free sample raised garden bed designs. So it can be kind of hard to wrap your head around what's involved in terms of equipment and planning if you haven't built a garden bed before. And this website just has a bunch of different options you can take a look at, including what kind of materials are involved, what kind of things you might want to grow in what kind of different bed, and also how much it might cost to build each one. It's also got a lot of really great free plans you can work with or modify. So once you've got an idea of what it is you want to build, and ideally we've agreed to fund it, we want to see what your plan is for making it happen. One of the big problems we run into over the past few years is a lot of other organizations who give this kind of funding will often just show up and do the build for you. We'll get together a team and do all of that. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're 3 part-time people, and in the summer, we do get more staff, but we may have up to 25 builds this year, so we can't commit to doing that for every school. We also think it's really important for people who are going to be using the garden to be involved in building it. It helps build investment, it helps build community, and it gives a sense of ownership because this is your garden, not ours. So part of what we'd like to see in your application is a plan for what we call your build day. And it doesn't actually have to be one build day. Some schools like to break it down over multiple days. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. We can do it like a one-off event, and that can be really exciting too, to have a bunch of people show up and build something together, but it can also be done in stages. So some things to think about are how long will it actually take to build and install your garden? Something like a really simple 4x8 raised frame can be done in a couple of hours. Something more complicated might need to be built off site or might take longer to build on site, might require specialized tools, and these are things you want to know in advance. And something that's become particularly important during kind of the home gardening craze while everybody's been stuck at home under COVID restrictions has been the planning and ordering of materials. So there has been a bit of a shortage of specific types of wood and other materials that we need to build the gardens. So untreated cedar is one of the best ways to build a garden because you don't want pressure treated materials touching soil where you might be growing food. And there was a bit of a shortage of that last year. And we're hoping it'll be better this year. But the earlier we can start ordering things for you and getting it delivered, the better. And we want to make sure we can get these things to you in advance of your planned build date, because it would be really disappointing to have everybody get together and have nothing show up. On top of materials and kind of a logistical plan for what the concrete build is going to look like, you need to think about who will be there. So how many people will it actually take to build this garden? You'd be surprised how few people are absolutely necessary to build a really simple garden bed, but there's also neat ways to get more people involved if you're interested. So you want to think about what roles absolutely need to be filled. If you're building something a bit more complicated, if you're going to need power tools, you probably want to have some adult volunteers, maybe someone from facilities or maintenance staff, maybe some handy teachers. If you're doing something more simple, like, moving a soil delivery into one place, breaking the soil, planting some seedlings, that might be able to be done with just kids from a specific class. So thinking about who wants to be involved and thinking about what needs to be done and who needs to be there to do it. Now, we will absolutely do our best to have someone there to help. I think we've managed to have someone out at every single build where we've been welcome. There have been some restrictions at certain schools about who's allowed on site at any given time, but we can work with you to work around that. And if it would be helpful for us to be there, we will do our best to be there. We can also, if this is something that might be challenging for your community, help you recruit and organize volunteers to help with the build. So we can do things like promoting things, we can connect you with other volunteers, we can help you plan out your build day to see, get the best kind of turnout you need. Another thing to take into account these days is a safety and social distancing plan. So we've had a lot of good luck over the past year with the work that we have done, being able to work within 6 feet apart of each other with people wearing masks. Because we're working outdoors in general, it's a lot safer, but it's good to take these things into account and maybe build your plan around people working in different pods so that they can stay safely distanced. Another important thing to think about, both in terms of your budget and in terms of recruiting your help, is what equipment you're going to need and where it'll come from. So in general, kind of the basics that we've needed, if the garden bed is being built on site, you need a cordless drill. You can use a corded drill, but sometimes access to outlets can be really complicated. So if you can get a cordless drill, that's the best. Some sort of hammer or mallet, shovels and rakes, buckets, and garden gloves. And some of this can be purchased as part of the grant to permanently live at the school. So things like shovels, rakes, spades, gloves, watering hose, those are really useful things for a lot of gardens to have. And it makes sense to build that into your budget and have the school keep those. Most of the time, you don't need to include a drill or an impact driver or a hammer or a wheelbarrow in your budget because it might just be used once for the build day. Sometimes your maintenance or facility staff might already have these things and you can borrow it. Most often, people in your neighborhood will have these things. So this is a great chance to get neighbors, parents, teachers, and other staff involved. And one great contribution people can make is volunteering their tools for the day. We do have some materials that we can bring in, but if we want to have multiple people building garden beds at the same time, it's great to have multiple tools. And we can work on plans for, labeling things, making sure everything goes home with the right person. But in general, it's expensive and doesn't make sense to buy these things for one-off builds, and we can usually source them for the day of. But connecting with people in your community who are handy, who have this kind of equipment, is another great way to recruit people and get them involved. So once your garden's built, we're interested in how you're going to use it. It can be really easy to get all caught up in the excitement of having a garden and not think about kind of the day-to-day details of how it's going to be used. So we're interested in learning about who's going to use it. Is it going to be student clubs? Is it going to be specific classes? Will parents and neighbors have access? We're interested in how they're going to use it. Is there a sharing plan? Is there some sort of system people will use to schedule time there? Is it just casual, whoever wants to show up? Are there going to be scheduled activities? We'd love to see the garden being incorporated into classes and curriculum in your school. This is something that's really being encouraged by the Ministry of Education and likely will be if some of the proposed changes to food learning come up soon. But we'd love to learn about what classes are going to use it and for what subjects, and how your school in general is going to build a culture of garden-based learning. Now, this might be a little bit beyond where your school is at, and if it's something you're interested in learning more about and working on, we can connect you with resources. We have some great things that have been brought to us. We're also working on developing our own resources, and we'd love to connect people who are interested in these things. So if you're not sure about how you're going to do these things and you want to learn more, this is another thing we can help with. And lastly, we want to hear how your school can benefit from having a garden. So if we give you the funding to build this, if we help you build this garden, what kind of impact do you want it to have? What kind of changes do you want to see in your school, and how are you going to make them happen? We really hope this is going to have a positive impact on your school. We've seen a lot of great effects in schools building gardens, and we'd like to learn about what it can do for you. Another consideration is the longer term maintenance plan. So this has kind of proven over a few years of broader school gardening programs to be a big challenge for a lot of schools. So this is something we ask you to build into your garden grant proposal. For gardens to really thrive and succeed in the long term, you need a plan for maintenance year round. So this includes things like who's going to do the planting, the harvesting, the weeding and watering, who's going to coordinate the maintenance. It can be really easy to say, oh yeah, this class will do it right now, or this teacher will do it right now. But what happens if that class isn't available that day, or if that teacher doesn't have time for it, or if the parent who's coordinating this moves away? Having some sort of coordination plan and more than one person involved, again, is the best chance to succeed. It's good to check in about whether or not it's going to be the same team year round, or whether or not this is going to change over summer break. So summer has been a big challenge for a lot of schools where, students aren't on site, a lot of teachers aren't on school every day. Some neighborhoods, the parents don't tend to be around. People might have other priorities and can't come to the school to do maintenance. We've had a lot of luck with some neighborhoods being able to coordinate a team to go in and do watering and maintenance over the summer, but other schools have found it really challenging. One thing that we have been able to do for the past couple of years that we're really excited about is offering summer maintenance support from our staff. So in the spring, we send out an email asking who needs help with maintaining their garden over the summer. And we create a schedule with our staff and our summer students to go around to all the different schools and do some basic watering and maintenance. And we can do this for schools that do already have some degree of maintenance, or for schools that don't have anybody who can be there. Now, something to consider about that is that, we're really glad to be able to offer this. We would love to keep it going, but we are funded by a temporary 3-year grant. So while we want to keep doing this for as long as we can't promise we'll be doing this forever. So while we would absolutely love to help you out, and we will be at any school we can be at, it's also important to have some backup plans and to try and incorporate your own summer maintenance plan if you can. Now, that's definitely been a challenge, especially in the past few years with different safety concerns and access. So we're here to help. We know there's no clear answers right now, and we'll work with you on it. But this is another thing to have a conversation about with your garden team. And last but not least, getting down to the details. So coming up with a budget can involve a lot of research, and we'd like to make that as easy as possible, but it really kind of depends school to school what it is you're looking for. We definitely recommend looking at a couple of different sources for materials like Home Hardware, Home Depot, different places where you might order your seeds, just to get a sense of what pricing's like. We don't expect you to have an absolute exact final number that you'll be held to, but we'd like to see kind of a general budget that's as accurate as possible. So some basic things to account for. If you are building a frame, if you are building a garden, we want to see some lumber for the frames. You're going to want to account for the wood that builds them. And untreated cedar is the best for safety and durability. You're going to want deck screws for assembly. You're going to want soil, and that generally needs to be delivered because it takes a lot of soil to fill a garden. You're probably going to want some seeds or seedlings. You may have other sources for that. It doesn't necessarily need to be part of your budget if you have it sourced elsewhere, but it's a thing to think about. We're also looking for other things you might want to order, like watering equipment, hoses, watering cans, garden tools like shovels, rakes, spades, gloves, etc. And if you're finding that you have some room in your budget after that, and you have ideas for how you want to improve the space, or you want to think about future maintenance, some other things you can include are storage bins or a shed, a bench or a picnic table, fertilizer or mulch, things like fencing or trellises if you want to grow something like runner beans, tomato cages, all these little extra things that might help your garden grow in the long term. So thanks for listening to that overview. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. I'm going to pause recording right now to give a chance for anyone to speak up. But for anybody who's watching the recording later on, please get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you if you have any questions, concerns, challenges, or barriers you come across in putting your application together. We're really here to help you build the best plan for your school, and we want to give you this grant. So please be in touch. Thanks.